This is Jennifer McNeely, and this presentation is for EDU 626 at Georgetown College, exploring ESL strategies across disciplines. I began my career as a teacher in 2002 and did not attend a teacher certification program before I began teaching. I was completely lost when I entered the classroom, unprepared for what was in store. I attended a teacher alternative certification program after a semester in the classroom, but I was not required to take any courses for English language learners. I never received any specific training for English language learners, or ELLs, and I would employ some techniques that I learned for special education students. There were times that I felt these were successful strategies, and other times I wished for guidance or training. I began teaching at an urban high school in Kentucky in 2012. The population of English language learners, ELLs, has increased significantly at this school over the past several years, and I decided to pursue an endorsement in English as a Second Language, or ESL, because I saw the need to help ELLs be successful in school. I have been trained to scaffold instruction and modify assignments to accommodate English language learners, but many teachers have ELLs in their classes with no co-teacher. My personal experiences with no training for ELLs and the sympathy for other mainstream teachers with ELLs who have had no training led me to try and answer my research question. How do mainstream teachers' self-perceived most effective English as a Second Language or ESL teaching strategies meet student learning needs as defined by world-class instructional design and assessment and access? The world-class instructional design and assessment, or WIDA, uses numerous approaches and theories in order to define language use in school settings. This is academic language, the language that English language learners must attain and negotiate to participate successfully in school, and are used in most states to inform the pedagogies of teachers of ELLs. The WIDA standards are the yardstick by which I measured the perceived effectiveness of ESL strategies implemented by mainstream teachers. In addition, all English language learners are assessed annually with the WIDA Access Test, checking for sufficient growth in English language acquisition. For this study, I focused on WIDA Standard Number 1, ELLs communicate for social and instructional purposes within the school setting. Standard Number 3, ELLs communicate information, ideas, and concepts necessary for academic success in the content area of mathematics. And Standard Number 4, ELLs communicate information, ideas, and concepts necessary for academic success in the content area of science. I focused on these three standards because I observed 2 mathematics courses, 1 science course, and elective courses. During my research, 3 key themes emerged. The first theme is the teacher's attitudes about the inclusion of and modifications for ELLs in mainstream classes. Most of the teachers' attitudes ranged from neutral to positive. Though teachers may be willing to accommodate ELLs, they may not have received sufficient training to create an environment in which students can be academically successful. Although well-intentioned, many teachers view the ESL teacher as the accommodation for content area instruction, and ELLs are often sent out of the classroom and away from instruction to seek help from the trained specialists. The second theme is the teacher's attitudes towards second language acquisition. One of the major trials English language learners face is acquiring academic content in English. There are an increasing amount of ESL teachers employed in the United States to teach ESL students and support their learning in school, yet it is still challenging for ELLs to improve their academic success in their mainstream classes. Most mainstream classroom teachers have not been properly trained to accommodate bilingual or ELL students. Many mainstream teachers' misconceptions about second language acquisition lead to negative attitudes and therefore exclusionary practices for ELLs. The misconceptions about the amount of time necessary for acquiring a second language is vastly different than what teachers believe. Many teachers believe that a second language can be acquired within only 2 years. However, this is incorrect and is closer to 7. Also, many teachers believe that students should be immersed in and use English only. However, studies have shown the value of incorporating a student's native language. The third theme is the teacher's attitudes towards professional development and training. Mainstream classroom teachers may deem their practices as good teaching or best practices for ESL students, but may be focusing solely on the academics and not on the cultural aspects of teaching. Cultural responsiveness and understanding are important parts of instruction, yet are not taken into consideration by teachers who have not received explicit training in cultural responsiveness. Even the best classroom teachers would benefit from additional professional development in ESL, in part because strategies that are most useful in teaching native English speakers may not translate well to ESL students. For this study, a systematic qualitative case study methodology was used that included 3 different methods of data collection from 6 different participants across different disciplines. This study design allowed me to collect both observational and self-reported data about perceived effective strategies for English language learners in mainstream classes. The participant population for this study included 6 teachers across different disciplines from an urban high school in Kentucky. The teachers who agreed to participate are 2 full-time math teachers, 1 art teacher, 1 industrial technology teacher, 1 culinary arts teacher, and 1 biology teacher. All teachers have a master's degree in their field and a minimum of 5 years of teaching experience. 3 of the teachers have prior work experience before becoming teachers. 1 teacher has taught in another country, is a native Spanish speaker, and is an English language learner herself. Of the 6 participants, only 2 have received any specific training in ESL strategies, as this graph shows. 2 structured classroom observations, approximately 30 to 60 minutes each, were conducted of teachers' modifications for English language learners. This way, I was able to see how the teachers act in the classroom, instead of asking them to tell me their feelings or perceptions. During some of these times, ELLs did not need help from the teacher or did not ask for help, and therefore I observed a small amount of interaction. Extensive field notes were taken during the observations, documenting any interactions between the mainstream teacher and ELLs specifically. Written artifacts used in conjunction with observed lessons, and photographs of any writing, drawings, or schematics used in conjunction with observed lessons were collected. A semi-structured interview was conducted with each teacher in between the 2 classroom observations, in which I determined their beliefs regarding their perceived successful ESL strategies. This semi-structured format allowed me to ask follow-up questions when and if needed. The questions that were asked are, what do you believe to be your most effective strategies for English language learners? What evidence do you see that those strategies are successful? What kinds of experiences, research, or training have informed your strategies for ELLs? Do you use the WIDA can-do descriptors and/or the students' access scores to inform your pedagogies? And if so, in what ways? Would you be interested in learning more about effective strategies for English language learners? And would you be interested in learning more about how to interpret WIDA can-do descriptors and access scores? After field notes, photographic, and interview data were collected, they were coded via a combination of process and descriptive coding methods. This was used to generate themes and patterns of perceived effective strategies for English language learners. After process and descriptive coding were completed, each code was placed into 3 distinct categories: accommodation strategies, personal connections, and instructional techniques. Accommodation strategies are the perceived accommodations used specifically for English language learners. Personal connections are the more casual and personal interactions between the teachers, the ELLs, and the other students in the classes. Instructional techniques are the strategies that teachers use for all students in the classroom and are not designed to be strategies specifically for English language learners. From these 3 categories, 2 overarching themes appeared: pragmatic pedagogies and trial and error. These themes reflect the practical strategies mainstream teachers use for ELLs that have a basis in some training, and those that are based on teachers' attempts at implementing successful strategies without specific training for ELLs. Pragmatic pedagogies appear to have some basis in training for ELLs and appear to be strategic. During the interviews, the teachers who had no specific training in ESL strategies expressed they had received some general training during faculty meetings. They employed these strategies when necessary and adapted them to the individual student as needed. All teachers observed used strong visual aids such as photos, bold or underlined vocabulary, and graphic organizers. Teachers allow students to use their phones to look up content vocabulary and encourage the use of games, websites, or activities online to support their learning. The Algebra 1 teacher, an English language learner herself, repeats vocabulary and asks students to repeat so that they become familiar with the terms and are able to recall them later on. Because she is a native Spanish speaker, she will often ask the other students with different native languages to offer their pronunciations. These pragmatic strategies have been successful for these mainstream teachers and have some foundation in training. However, many of the tactics used by these same teachers have come from trial and error. From experience in the field, teachers have weeded out the strategies that have been unsuccessful for ELLs and retained and adapted those that yield positive results. It became evident through interviews that the majority of these mainstream teachers are mostly untrained in best practices and strategies for English language learners. Because of this, they often work in what could be referred to as survival mode, in which they have implemented accommodations for any population of student from personal experiences, the school of hard knocks as one participant called them, and from trying new techniques in class and continuing to use the ones that work. For this reason, the theme trial and error was created for those tactics that teachers use on a trial basis and retained those that yielded positive results from ELLs, such as improved assessment scores. The art teacher is able to communicate with students using hand signals or drawings. Peer tutoring is a tactic that was observed in many of the classes. Some teachers allow the use of the students' native language classes, and as a result, these teachers have seen an improvement in retention and assessment scores. Although these tactics have been implemented by trial and error, they have proven to be successful. The teachers have seen improvements in test scores and retention of the course material by implementing these tactics. Despite a lack of training in specific strategies for ELLs and in WIDA or Access test scores, teachers are following WIDA standards in many ways. In all courses, students understand established classroom routines. This corresponds with WIDA standard number 1, in which students understand the instructional language of the classroom. The teachers in this study use several supports to help students, including realia, manipulatives, illustrations, graphic organizers, and using the students' native languages to support the learning of English. Study skills and strategies are implemented by using graphic organizers for note-taking and allowing students to use Google Translate and/or their own native languages. Teachers made real-world connections by creating activities in which students look for housing and transportation, as well as knife safety and cooking skills. I observed most of the teachers making personal connections during my classroom visits. They asked students about personal items. These personal connections correspond to WIDA standard number 1, in which students are able to communicate for social purposes within the school setting. Students also interacted with each other during the observations, sometimes discussing the class content or the particular assignment, and at other times communicating in what appeared to be a more social context. In the Algebra 1 course, students worked on algebraic expressions and multidimensional shapes using manipulatives, which are examples of Standard 3 for grades 9 through 12. The teacher asked the student to use the manipulatives to represent certain algebraic expressions. Students were then able to understand the concept of representation in mathematics using these multidimensional shapes. In the biology course, students worked on adaptation, taxonomy, and life cycles, which are grade appropriate examples for standard number 4. The teacher began with a PowerPoint in which he used pictures that corresponded with the vocabulary for the lesson. Important vocabulary terms and definitions were in bold print and were underlined for emphasis. During the presentation, students took guided notes on a worksheet provided by the teacher. They were able to use these notes later on an activity for the class. Despite the lack of training, these mainstream teachers are creating welcoming classroom environments and implementing the strategies that they hope will ensure student success. Although the majority of these teachers have received no real training in the WIDA standards, they are following them in many ways. Through pragmatic pedagogies and trial and error, they have found and adapted strategies that work for their current population of ELLs. All of the participants in this study expressed that they are willing to receive training in both WIDA standards and how to interpret access scores in order to inform their future pedagogies. The biggest challenge for the teachers is the time involved. If they are not trained on campus during faculty meetings, they may not receive training. The limitations to this study included a limited amount of time in which to observe teachers and scheduling conflicts. Due to the short amount of time to conduct this study, I was limited to only 2 classroom observations per teacher. This short time frame limited the amount of observed interactions between the teachers and ELLs. I was unable to observe one class a second time due to scheduling conflicts, and I was forced to find an alternative course to observe instead that did not conflict with the course that I taught myself. As a result of this study, I would like to coordinate with my fellow ESL teachers and school administration to create specific professional development for mainstream teachers, both core content and elective courses, both veteran and new teachers. Teachers can receive training in WIDA standards, second language acquisition, interpreting access scores, and how to use them to inform their pedagogies. Mainstream teachers can also be encouraged to discuss strategies for ELLs during their personal learning communities, PLC meetings. The ESL teachers can provide a different strategy to the teachers each month with recommendations of how to implement them. The teachers could then determine how best to use the strategy for their content areas. Although some technology was observed during this study, future studies or collaboration with teachers can involve different ways in which technology can be a useful tool for ELLs according to WIDA standards.